Hello and welcome to the Networking EcoCast event. On today's event, we are excited to be joined by Illumio and SolarWinds. My name is David Davis from Actual Tech Media, and I'm excited to be your moderator for today's event. On today's event, you will hear from enterprise technology experts, and I hope you learn a lot and get all your questions answered as well, because this is going to be a very educational event. Just a little bit of background, we at Actual Tech Media created the MegaCast and EcoCast event series a number of years back because we had this great idea to help educate the world of IT professionals about the most innovative enterprise-grade technology solutions available to you to help you do it in one online virtual event, to get all your questions answered and never have to leave the comfort of your office or even your couch if you're that lucky to be sitting at home on the couch. And at the same time, you have a chance to win some very cool prizes as well. So thank you everyone for taking time out of your busy day to join us on today's event. So before we kick off the event, you should know the format. You'll hear from two of the hottest companies in the networking space today. Each presenter will speak for roughly 20 minutes, followed by a live 3 to 5 minute Q&A session where I'll take the best questions from you out there in the audience and pose them to today's presenters. We'll also be answering as many questions as we can electronically because we get like hundreds of questions on these events. So keep the questions coming because we want to answer every one of them that we possibly can. This event is not a competition between the presenters. There's no winner being selected on the event today. It's an educational event for you. So we have asked the presenters to focus on what makes their solution unique and how they're solving your real-world problems. Now, before we get into it, just a little bit of housekeeping to cover here. We have prizes. We have 3 Amazon $500 gift cards. I'll talk more about those in just a moment. Like I said, we want all your questions. Use that questions box there in the audience console. You can resize it. You can take the corner and drag it out. It's like a windowed operating system there. You can do the same with the slides window. You can move it around. And so ask all the questions you want, and we will answer every one of them, is my hope here. I'm also going to be asking you some poll questions out there in the audience. So I appreciate your responses to those, and I'll be sharing the results of those polls with you. Let's see. We also want this to be a social event, so we're going to be tweeting about the event over on Twitter. I'll talk about the hashtag in just a moment. And we also have resources from today's presenters. They're in the Handouts tab on your console. Just to the right of where it says Questions and Answers, it says Handouts. If you click on that, you can download the PDF documents that were hand-selected by today's presenters, so make sure that you check those out. There's also some additional resources in the Handouts tab that you might want to see. And then when it comes to prizes, we have 3 $500 Amazon gift cards. I'll be giving one away after the first set of presenters and the other 2 at the end of the event after the second presenter on today's event. To be eligible, you must meet the Legalese prize terms and conditions that can be found on our website, events.actualtechmedia.com, and you can find the link to that in the Handouts tab. The primary qualification is that you must be live or present on this live event to be eligible for the drawings. If you're watching this event on demand, I'm sorry, the event drawings have already occurred. Now, through the MegaCast and EcoCast event series, generous attendees who have won prizes have helped us to make thousands of dollars in donations to the selected charities you see on the screen here. And if you would like to make a donation to charity through your prize value, we would love to help you do that. So thank you in advance if you choose to do so. The hashtag for the event today on Twitter is Networking EcoCast. I'll be tweeting about today's presentations using that hashtag. If you want to tweet, feel free to use the hashtag, and I'll be following and retweeting and commenting to just about anything that anyone says out there. Today's event is produced by Actual Tech Media, and you can follow us on Twitter. You can also follow me, David M. Davis. I want to point out that we do at Actual Tech Media offer content through our YouTube channel, our Facebook channel, and our 10 on Tech podcast. Those are available over in the iTunes store, and we hope that you will check those out. Now, before we do a few poll questions and then I introduce the first presenters, I wanted to do just a little bit of kind of level setting when it comes to the state of enterprise technology. Being a former network admin myself, the network, when I was an admin even a few years back, was very static. You know, you built it once, you designed it, it didn't really change. You don't want to touch the configurations on those routers and switches. You selected a single vendor, it was all manually configured, you know, using the CLI. It was very expensive and it was very hardware focused. If you needed new features in the network, well, in many cases you had to buy another box, and that other box is expensive and had its own configuration, and everything was very complex, you know, tons of just static configurations. And if you needed to add a new feature, well, you had to do a ton of testing, and it was very hard to manage, and you had dedicated staff, you know, to help you manage the network. And that was at a small company. You know, at a large company, you have teams of network admins to keep the network up and running. And I really see that as yesterday's network, because today, you know, the network is really only there to support the needs of the business. The companies aren't running a network just for fun. You know, we need to focus on the needs of the business, and the business needs today agility. They need to move fast. They need scalability. They need to ramp up, you know, as quickly as the business demands. They need efficient networks and efficiency, you know, in general. They need cost effectiveness. They need the lowest cost possible, and they need it all to be very secure. And for that reason, today's enterprise networks have to be dynamic. They have to be able to change with the needs of the business. You should be able to use best-of-breed tools on the network. I don't think it has to be a single vendor, you know, focus anymore. Use the best network solution that's out there, whether it's hardware, software, whatever it is, whether it's in the cloud. Pull everything together and make the best solution for your company. You need to automate things, you know, as much as possible. Your time is best spent not making, you know, a single manual configuration, but creating some sort of automation that can, you know, do its job without you. The network needs to be cost effective and more software focused. And I think just as importantly as all the rest, it all has to be secure. And so I'm really excited about today's event. You'll be educated on the latest, most innovative networking solutions available to help you to better modernize your network. Again, we want to help you to get all your questions answered. We have veteran network experts on the event today, and, you know, also find the solutions to make your network more efficient, more performant, more reliable, and more secure. Now, before I introduce the first presenters, I've got 3 quick poll questions for you. The first poll question is on the screen, and it's what is your industry vertical? And this is has a long list of answers, so you may need to scroll down on the right side of the slides window right there. Just take the slides slider and scroll down the window and select the vertical that corresponds to your company. And if you have to scroll down, this is a good opportunity to take the slides window and move your mouse to the corner of it and just drag it out and make it bigger. And that way you can make sure you see all the architectural diagrams and demonstrations, things like that, that will be done on today's event. So thank you everyone who's answering that poll question. I see the responses coming in. Let's get a few more responses and I'll share this with you. Kind of a horse race at this point. I can see it looks like healthcare and technology are leading the charge. Thank you everyone who voted on that. Let me share the results. And it looks like technology won out 23% representation by technology companies today, 14% healthcare, looks like 8% higher education, 9% manufacturing. So really good representation by a lot of different verticals. Thank you everyone who voted on that poll. Here's another poll, and that is how many people work at your company? Should be an easy one to answer. And while you answer that, I should also point out, since this is a completely live event, if you do have any trouble with your audience console, either hearing or seeing, I do recommend that you press a refresh button on your browser. 99% of the time will resolve any problem. Just like in IT, right? 99% of the time a reboot will resolve any problem. Well, in this case, a refresh will resolve any problem. So if that does not work, send me a message in the questions box there, and I'll do my best to help you out. Chrome is the recommended browser for this platform. And if you have any trouble with the autoplay of the videos, which sometimes does happen, a private browsing session in Chrome, which is known as incognito, will usually fix that as well. So I just shared the results of this poll, and it says how many people work at your company, and it looks like 23% of you out there are at 100 to 500 person companies. 16% are at 10,000 plus large enterprises, and a real good distribution across the board there. So thank you everyone who voted in that. And then last poll question before we kick it off with our first presenters. The poll question is, what's your time frame for updating your existing or selecting new network solutions? Could be any kind of network solution, software, hardware, anything. So I'll leave that question up there for you to answer. And in just a moment, I'll introduce the first presenters. All right, looks like most everyone has voted in that poll. Thank you everyone for your responses. It's time to get started. It's now my pleasure to introduce Mr. Leon Adato, head geek at SolarWinds, and Mr. Kevin M. Sparenberg, technical content manager for Thwack at SolarWinds as well. Leon and Kevin, are you with us?
We are.
I'm here.
Awesome.
There we go.
Thanks for being on. Take it away.
Thank you, David. Okay, so before we go any farther than just the first slide, Kevin, I think I want to frame out what it is that we're doing here and what we mean by removing network blind spots. What we're talking about is some of the more advanced devices that you have in your environment. You know, we've got a whole bunch of routers and switches, and we got really, really good at managing those, but there's this whole new class of devices that represent a different kind of challenge, right, Kevin?
Yeah, I mean, most systems and most people grew up, let's be serious, I learned on router on a stick, you probably learned router on a stick, and it's the way you learn how to do your basic switching. And it's fine, and that for years has scaled, you know, whether you're talking, you know, multi-level distribution or anything else, everything was the same. VLANs are set up the same, routing was done the same, you watched interfaces the same way, and that's fine when you're talking kind of inside the house. But the industry has really shifted in the past, like, let's say 5-10 years, and that's what we're here to talk about.
Right. And the problem isn't that the devices got more complex, that we had to up-level our skills. The real problem is that the tools that manage and monitor those devices haven't really gotten good at showing us the special things that they do. So, for example, you know, firewalls. Firewalls are incredibly important in your environment, but when you monitor them, frequently they show up as a router, wah-wah. You know, you see some interfaces, you might be able to get the configuration back, but in terms of the core function of what that thing does, you're going to blind. And that was where we got the title for this talk, was that these advanced devices, Cisco Nexus devices, Cisco ASAs, Palo Alto firewalls, and so on, those are really, you know, you have this blind spot because you can't see into them. And without that, you're not as effective as you could be. So that's really what we're here to talk about. So who are these weird voices that are babbling at you? My name is Leon Adato, and yes, my actual title is Head Geek. I've been in IT for 30 years. I've been focused on monitoring for 20 of those. I've been at SolarWinds user since 2003, but then they scooped me up, and I got to have this, you know, title, this Head Geek job since 2014. You can find me on our 150,000 strong user community, Thwack.com. My username there is AdatoLE, or you can find me on the Twitters as Leon Adato. Kevin, who are you?
All right. Well, I'm technically the content manager for Thwack, but that encompasses a whole lot. Basically, just means I look around and I decide what's good, promote it, and make sure people get, you know, recognition for it. But really, I'm an IT enthusiast. I have been in IT basically since high school, and I've worked with SolarWinds Solutions for over 10 years there. I was a network engineer, and then unfortunately my company found out I knew how to run Exchange, so I became a systems administrator.
Yep.
A couple of years ago, before I joined SolarWinds, I was nominated and made a THWAC MVP. And the biggest and best thing I can say about myself is I have never ever worked in sales, so I only ever think about the technical problems and give you solutions for that. I can also be found on THWAC and on Twitter. I am KM Sigma on both.
Fantastic. All right, so let's just dive into this then. The first thing I want to talk about is firewalls. And although I know that slides are the delight of every IT professional, we love staring at them and wondering what the heck they mean. Unfortunately, this is going to be a very slide light and demo heavy talk. So just give me a second here to share my screen. There we go. And switch over to the demo system. Kevin, just confirm for me. You can see what we're supposed to see, right?
Yep, Orion demo, sitting there.
Okay, there we go. And I want just to point out for a second that oriondemo.solarwinds.com or demo.solarwinds.com is available to everybody all the time. If you want to kick the tires on things and see what it looks like, it's all there, and that's what we're using. So it's just, there's a few things you can't do. You can't down my router. Thank you very much. But otherwise, you can see how everything works. So the first thing I want to talk about is firewalls. You know, right now what we're looking at is my East Firewall B, and I specifically jumped over to the access lists, although if I go over to, let me just jump over to the summary for a second just to prove that, you know, nothing's up my sleeve. Here's a firewall. We've got, probably should have preloaded these screens so that they were cached, but, you know, it's a live demo. We'll see how it goes. Here's a firewall. We have our statuses. We have admin context. I get, you know, percent memory and CPU load and things like that. So, you know, it's a device. It's out there. And most of the time, this is what you need to know. But for firewalls, there's something very important that obviously everyone's interested in, which is the access lists, which if they show up in a configuration backup, there's just one big munge of text. So,
so hard to parse.
Right. So network insight, which is sort of just an idea, a philosophy that we use for these highly specialized devices. Network insight breaks out these things and shows them to you so that you can deal with them. So for example, I can see that fully redundant has something going on here. Oh, it's got an overlapping rule, as does fully shadowed. And of course, you know, it is a demo system. I did like break things on purpose just to see what's going on. And I want to, let's see here. Let me take a look at fully redundant. Nope, there we go. Fully redundant, fully shadowed. Okay. So what I'm looking at here, just a short rule set. Yeah, just a short rule set. And what I'm looking at here is that this set is completely shadowed by another set of rules. So once I have deny anything else that appears after it isn't going to work, whether this is a large set of rules or a small set of rules. The other thing is that I get the hit count over on the right-hand side to tell me which rules are getting hit and which ones are not. That level of insight, that level of awareness is really important to be able to know whether your rules are written effectively, whether you've got lines there that don't matter, whether you know, all of those things. So I think that's the first thing that I want to point out in the network insight is the idea that you've got, you know, more information than you would normally have. To get here, you know, through the iOS, you'd have to type a bunch of commands along with grep, along with filtering things out. Any other thoughts, Kevin?
Yeah, it's one of those things that access lists, I mean, a lot of us have used them from routers and switches, and normally in routers and switches they can be, I'm hesitant to use the word manageable, but I think I will. If you've got, let's say, 30, 40 lines of these, that's fine. But on a firewall, you can have tens of thousands of lines of ACLs. The problem with having that many ACLs, generally speaking, is that you kind of get into analysis paralysis. You've got so much so much you're staring at, especially if you're trying to do live troubleshooting, that it's really difficult. The other thing that's really nice about being able to see these shadow rules is we can see that this particular rule here has had 0 hits. So what's that tell me? It's unnecessary. I don't need this rule, so I can go in and disable this rule or delete it out entirely. Because of that, since that kind of config change, or the original config, is actually sitting in resident memory, when you've actually now removed this line, you're actually getting a little bit more memory back for your router to continue, or for your firewall to continue to do its job, and maybe add additional rules that are actually being used.
Exactly. All right, so that gets us through firewalls. I'm just going to bounce back to the slides for a second. There we go. And just as a reminder, if you've got questions for us, go ahead and throw those up in the Q&A panel, and we'll either try to catch them as we're talking, or we'll catch them afterward. So the next aspect that I want to look at are data center switches. The most well-known data center switch of the caliber we're talking about is the Nexus, the Cisco Nexus devices. So once again, I'm going to share the screen. And what we're looking at here specifically are the VPCs, because that's where you spend most of your time on a Nexus, is at the VPC, the virtual port. For those people who haven't had the joy of managing or setting these up yet, the idea of a virtual port channel is that on 2 different Nexuses, I designate a set of interfaces, and I channel bond them together. Now that's something that many people are familiar with, just taking a bunch of circuits and making them bonded together so they get more effective throughput. But you do that on 2 different Nexuses, and you virtually connect them. So for example, PO30 here. So PO30 on, just let me move over, so Nexus 1 and Nexus 2, port channel or port object 30 is my Ethernet port 1, 2, and 3 over there, and it's port number 2, 3, 4, and 5 on the other side. So they don't have to exactly match, although it's kind of weird and, not the way that I would do it. But I'm kind of OCD about stuff like that. In any case, at a glance, I'm able to see which of these port channel objects are having a problem, which are completely down. Okay, so this one, PO23, is really an issue, or VPC20 is really a problem. And VPC30 is okay, but I don't have the redundancy that I wanted. And without clicking anything else, I can see that everything is up and happy on the left side on Nexus 1. On Nexus 2, I've got 2 ports that are down, 1 that's not configured at all, and port 4, Ethernet 4, is carrying the full load. And that's why I'm having such a problem over here, is because it's actually over capacity. So I can do that. Now, normally this would be like 30 different commands on 2 different boxes to get this kind of insight. The other thing I can do right from here is take a look at the configs. Now, in this case, I don't know that it's really a configuration issue as much as it's just the ports are down. But I can look at the configuration, and I can view them side by side to make sure that they match up on Nexus 1 and Nexus 2. So, again, I'm not doing anything really revolutionary. It's not like we're using custom-crafted artisanal APIs that, do things that, angels don't even know about yet. Or we're not doing anything just ridiculous. We're just pulling information off of the box, but we're presenting it in a way that makes it very easy at a glance to see what's working, what's not working, and why.
And the big part with that is that you typically don't have 2 Nexus switches in your data center. You typically have 4 or 6 or 8 or more. And being able to actually surface this information quickly, especially these VPCs that maybe only have, 2 Ethernets inside of them. And you got to remember, you've got these Ethernet interfaces, each with their own configs, part of a port channel on one Nexus, which has its own config, and then above that, you've got the VPC on those 2 different disparate Nexus devices who have their own configs. So being able to bring this all up, as Leanne was saying, I think we all initially, when we started learning networking, we did troubleshooting the same way. When packet loss existed, what did? We did a show interface, then we hit up enter, and then we hit up enter, and then we hit up enter to see if the number incremented. But we don't have that time anymore. We're dealing with tens of thousands of interfaces. So being able to surface this stuff quickly and easily is the biggest thing that SolarWinds can help you do.
Right. Okay. bouncing along to the next item, and actually I'm not even going to bother with, you can see my screen, you can see the slide, see the next slide. Next thing we're going to talk about is site-to-site VPNs. So I'm just going to go straight back to the other thing and move to the next tab. So here I've got, again, it's a Cisco ASA, and it's doing, in addition to firewalling, it's also doing my site-to-site VPNs. Now the interesting thing about site-to-site VPNs is that, again, in most monitoring setups, they appear as an interface, which is fine. But you know,
I like the way
the interface. Yeah,
I mean, it's okay, but it's not good.
Well, you know, and everyone's run into this. If you've done this, is that, oh, the interface is up. I don't know why my data isn't passing. Because the interface isn't the problem. It's the tunnel. And, you know, that's really the issue is that, you know, the interfaces can be pinging each other, but the tunnel broke down somewhere along the way. So what we're doing here is showing each of your site-to-site VPNs, and we're showing the status of them. Now, we have a lot of them that are failing because, you know, we broke them because that's important or whatever. We're also showing for the ones that are up how much bandwidth is passing between them. That's kind of important because your site-to-site VPNs are often your most important circuits that you've got. They're the ones that are connecting, you know, site to site, and you're passing your customer data or your sales information or whatever it is. And so you really want to know how much traffic is moving, whether it's being used effectively, whether George in accounting is streaming Netflix across it or whatever it is. So you want to be able to know that. Also, if it's failed, which phase of the tunnel setup did it fail at? Again, at a glance, yes, you can filter things. You know, the interface starts to look about the same. You know, I want to look at my interfaces that are, you know, I just want to see the ones that are good. I just need the happy green screen. Just make me feel better. Also, let me see, you know, also I want to see the ones that are passing a larger amount of traffic, whether that's in or out, and I can manage that and say, all right, so only show me the ones that are showing, okay, we'll say that that's a high amount of traffic right there. I only have one circuit that's really, you know, that's really moving that much data. Okay, fine. But I can look through this and I can, again, surface the information that matters.
And one step further, if we want to talk about surfacing, let's say that this one that we found, you want to start watching. See the little star on the right side? Now, it's not going to let you do it in the demo because it's a demo. But if you star that, then that actually bubbles up to the details page. Yeah, so that actually bubbles up to the details page. So you can actually see at one glance, these are the all site-to-site VPNs, especially if you have dozens or hundreds of these. This will let you know, oh, these are my favorite site-to-site VPNs, like data center to data center, or data center to, you know, business continuity location, or maybe even your data center to your cloud. These are the ones you want to watch. You want to make sure it's surfaced right there at the top, and they show on the summary page.
Right. I was just clicking around here, sorry. So yeah, what you're going to see is that the two that we marked as favorite, oh, I filtered it out. There we go. Okay, the two that I marked as favorite are always going to show up at the top there. So that's the part that we're talking about here. Okay, and the last thing, as long as we're talking about VPNs, the flip side of site-to-site VPNs is user VPNs. I'm just going to bounce straight over here. So remote access VPNs or user VPNs are both better and worse from a support standpoint. They're better because, honestly, there's fewer moving parts. You know, once you have the thing that they're going to connect into, once you've deployed the agent, they pretty much, you know, double-click and off they go. The downside of it is there are users involved. That's the part that makes it really hard, because there's a lot more of them than you have site-to-site VPNs, and you know, users are kind of funny creatures sometimes. They do strange things, so you often spend more time managing or troubleshooting. You know, the CEO who can't, you know, the interwebs are down. What do I do? Yes, I know. I just characterize CEOs as being somewhat technology phobic or challenged, and you know, it's true. It's true some of the time. Again, I have 30 years of experience to back that up. In any case, what this screen allows you to do, and it's the same device, it's the same firewall, right? We were just looking at remote access. Just looking at site to site. Now we're looking at a remote access. Is I can see the history of the of users and what they've been doing. So I can see that these folks are actually connected right now. They've been connected actually for the better part of the day. This is how much data they've been passing. You know, this person was connected for 6 hours. This person was connected for 2 days. Whatever it is, I can see what their status is now. If somebody was connected and then disconnected and connected again, I'd see their name twice here. So I could see that, for example, they were, you know, at the coffee shop and they connected, but now they're in the airport and they didn't, or what have you. It also allows you to answer the question, you know, when somebody says, oh, remote access isn't working. Well, actually, it's working for about, you know, 50 people, so let's figure out what your issue is. Or it lets you know that, in fact, that's true. Something is wrong with the remote access system. I can see that everybody is not connected, and I can begin troubleshooting at the correct entry point.
The other part is a lot of organizations will have, you know, outside vendors or outside contractors coming in to do a little bit of work here and a little bit of work there. If they're passing through your VPN, you can see that here. So if they're billing you for, I don't know, 73 hours over 4 days, and you say, well, you were only connected for 8 total hours, what work did you do? You kind of got a little bit of ammo there to go back them. It's one of Destiny's favorite examples.
Right. Right. Destiny Bertucci is one of the other, our security engineer, one of our security engineers here at SolarWinds. So yeah, it's, and again, you get some robust filtering, so you can get down to the problem that you're trying to find or the thing that you're trying to work on at that moment. You can also sort and group. And honestly, that is to show. The point isn't, you know, the point isn't to look at, so there's like, there we go. Sorry, lost my train of thought. The point isn't that this specific function is going to, you know, make your life all perfect and better. The bigger point is that having the insight, having the ability to see these relatively complex, relatively sophisticated aspects of your network allows you to figure out what's healthy, what's not, get to troubleshooting the problems more effectively, and, you know, not basically be clicking or typing around until you happen upon it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's all about getting back to the status quo, getting back to the norm. So it's finding your issues as quickly as possible, making sure you're only troubleshooting things you should be troubleshooting, and making sure that your business can continue to carry on.
Exactly. All right, so last point, we've got a couple of resources here. This is exactly what's in the handouts that you can download. There's a PDF that you can download handouts. Obviously, there's some things you can download and try out. We have a 30-day demo. Again, I want to remind people that demo.solarwinds.com is always there to kick the tires on all of our software. Everything is right there. You don't have to install it. There's an ebook, a free ebook, device level understanding, that goes over everything that Kevin and I talked about today and more. And finally, our user community, thwack.com, that you can jump on there. And yes, we talk about, hey, the software is doing this and how do I do that? But we also talk about deeply important things like, hey, I've never done a firewall rule before. Can someone help me out? Or I'm setting up this new device and, anybody got some pointers? Or, who's the greatest starship captain of all time? We do talk about that as well. Mal Reynolds, right, exactly.
It's Mal.
In any case.
We do this every time.
It's a thing. In any case, if you have questions for us, I'm opening up the question channel here, and we can take a look, and we are happy to answer anything that you've got. I'm going to move to the thank you slide, but we are actually, let me see what we got here. So someone's asking, is it possible to do packet capture and analyze the data within SolarWinds like Wireshark? Good question. So we do a little bit of packet capture. The function that you're talking about is called a DI, Deep Packet Inspection. However, there's also a free tool. SolarWinds has, what are we up to, like 40 different, completely free as in puppies and beer, tools. And one is a Wireshark analyzer. So it doesn't replace Wireshark, it enhances Wireshark by interpreting the data a little bit more. So there is a solution for you there. Kevin can dynamic threshold for site-to-site VPN traffic to an alert be generated? Yeah, once you're collecting the data, that's a wonderful part about monitoring tools in general, and SolarWinds in specific, is that we're collecting the data. That's what monitoring is the regular ongoing collection of data. After that, what you do with it, alerting, reporting, et cetera, is simply a happy byproduct. So yeah, SolarWinds will allow you to set thresholds either on a fixed threshold or on an average, or whatever math you kind of want to do, time-bound or not time-bound.
Yep, and those are the kind of things that we get a lot of questions about on Thwack, because we may not ship with that specific alert out of the box, and that's okay because not everyone's going to need that type of alert. But on Thwack, there's an entire area called Alert Lab where you just go in and pose a question like this and say, here's the 3 things I think I need, and then the community just jumps up and says, oh, I've already written that one. Here's what it looks like. Or, oh, not quite. This is kind of where I think you're going, and then everyone chips in and helps you out.
Okay, let's see, what else do we have? What was that demo site again? Just because it's a shameless plug, demo.solarwinds.com. It's really easy. Someone also asked, can you sort by various columns? I'm going to give the larger answer. Depending on what view you're looking at, depending on what screen, there are some that will interactively let you sort, and some where you might have to create a new view or a new report to do that. So generally the answer is yes. Specifically, the answer is tell me what screen you're talking about, and then we'll get down to the details. Let's see. I'm not answering any sort of, someone was asking a question about pricing. Here's the funny part. Both Kevin and I are engineers. We are not salespeople. Now, we all know the rule, like if you're talking to a salesperson and you ask them a technical question, you have to be a little suspicious about the answer. The same thing is true in reverse for Kevin and me. If you ask us a pricing question, we're probably going to lie to you. So don't ask us. However, no, not necessarily. But we will do it sometimes just for lab value. In any case, I'm certain that there are people standing by in our sales department to tell you any price you want, and they'll actually tell you the truth. Let's see here. We have Cisco Meraki MX appliances at a lot of our divisions. Can SolarWinds monitor the site-to-site VPN connections between those devices? Short answer is yes. And we actually have Meraki-specific views for the APs as well. So important point. Is this for Cisco only? Kevin, help me answer this one the right way.
Okay. Well, we're in RC now, so answer it any way you like.
Okay, great. Okay, I just had to make sure.
Yep.
We are release candidates, so it's just before general availability for Palo Alto firewalls. So the answer is yes. We support, right now, Network Insight works for both Cisco firewalls and Palo Altos. And if you say, well, wait a minute, I have, SolarWinds NPM, Network Performance Manager, and I don't see Palo Alto stuff in there, it's because the release candidate is out, but the general availability hasn't happened yet. But it's coming very, very soon. Is there a trial option? Yes, almost all of our software has a 30-day trial. So you download it, it's unlimited, so you can monitor as many things as you want to with it. And at the end of 30 days, you just buy the license level that you want, and nothing changes. And that's as salesy as I get about this. Let's see here. We're at, we've been talking for a while. I'm going to continue to answer these questions, online, but I want to give the next presenters a chance to jump on here. So we appreciate everything that, all the talks and everything. And hang on a second, I'm just going to look at the slides, and there we go. I'm going to just move that forward. We appreciate everything. Keep asking those questions, and find us on Thwack or Twitter or anywhere else. Thank you so much.
Awesome presentation, Kevin and Leon. A really great job. Thank you so much for being on the event today.
Thanks for having us.
Excellent, excellent. For more information, all the resources that Leon and Kevin showed on the screen there, all the URLs, you can download those in the Handouts tab. Just click on that handout, download it. It's a PDF, and all the links are clickable in there. Just click the link, and it'll take you to the respective resource that they were talking about there. So lots of good questions coming in. Keep them coming in. Kevin and Leon are still answering those questions, so stay tuned for the answers to your questions. Now it's time to give out our first Amazon $500 gift card on today's event. The first winner of a prize is Michael Duff from Ohio. Congratulations, Michael from Ohio. If you didn't win, stay tuned because we have 2 more Amazon $500 gift cards to give out after the next presentation. All right, so it's time to get moving and move on with our next presentation here on the Networking EcoCast. And with that, it's my pleasure to introduce Mr. Nathaniel Iverson, Vice President of Field Enablement at Illumio. Nathaniel, are you with us?
I am. Hello, everyone.
Take it away.
You bet. It's my pleasure. All right. Well, what we're going to do today is talk a little bit about security segmentation. That is, how you keep things going inside the network in order to be more secure. And what we've found is that many of our customers have struggled with segmentation. It's hard. And so we'll talk a little bit about that, and we'll talk about some solutions for how you can decouple segmentation from the network and what that'll give you in practical terms and how to get there on a journey. So we'll start by just recognizing that many people are pursuing a segmentation initiative. In some cases, it's due to external pressure from an auditor or a regulator or a compliance organization that your business may have to comply with, like PCI or the SWIFT consortium. It could be critical national infrastructure like NERC. And when these mandates come down, they have to be addressed immediately. The other way that it happens is that sometimes people are just aware that there's a very significant risk profile for the assets they have, customer data, personal information, and they realize there would be a huge reputational loss if they were to have information compromised. And so what organizations generally want to do in response is to segment their network. And an easy way to understand the value is to think about a submarine. Now, we don't build submarines like they are on the left with no compartments and wide open. Instead, they're actually built with bulkheads all throughout them. And the reason is submarines, even the slightest compromise would mean that the whole thing would sink. Whereas if there's bulkheads and a leak develops, then it can be isolated to one particular part of the vessel and everything can be saved. The reason this is important is because of how a typical threat advances through a network. In many of the most public and high-profile compromises that we see in the news, somebody gets into a system that is very peripheral or even outside of the enterprise. It could be a vendor system. It could be a point-of-sale system or a printer or an IP camera in a lobby, something that's not that valuable, but yet it can traverse through networks, and sometimes if the interior of the network is not segmented, it can progress across 10, 15, 20 systems until it finally reaches something of value, a core database, a crown jewels application, or something similar. So with a strong desire for organizations to segment their world, why is it that it hasn't really been the case? Well, primarily, I think many infrastructure organizations in particular feel the pressure of being told you have to go faster, automate the network, respond to DevOps, respond to changing application architectures, and yet they're already dealing with an extremely complex and distributed rule set across dozens or hundreds of devices in the network and firewalls and things like that. And at the same point in time, the security team is applying pressure to say, we have these mandates. There are things that we need to tighten up and do better. And against that backdrop, segmentation becomes hard. It's hard because there's typically poor application level visibility. Many people can get good network visibility, top talkers, and how the bandwidth is being used, but to see individual applications is challenging. When people have highly heterogeneous environments where you may have some things that are in a data center I own, some things may be in a partner or in a public cloud, or just in different data center builds. It can be the case that these different environments have different gear. You can't easily implement the same security policy in multiple places. If the policy is already very complex, it has tens or hundreds of thousands of rules, or in the case of some large global organizations, billions of rules, how do you deal with that complexity and add new segmentation rules into the environment? And it turns out that because of this, sometimes a very small request, like separate these PCI applications from each other inside the PCI environment, it's easy to say, but sometimes hard to do. So most organizations have already thought about this, and they've tried to do one of two things. The first is they've tried to do more with the network. They've said, let's buy newer, better switches. Let's put in more firewalls. Let's drag them deeper into the data center and try to use that as an approach. Now, other people have tried to use an SDN-based approach. They've said, look, we've already got lots of network, we've got lots of firewalls. Can we just automate the policy? It's super complex, but maybe the computers can help us, and we'll go ahead and we'll automate the policy. The challenge is, in both of these, that there's a lot of administration points. Different vendors are often present between the network and between firewalls, between hypervisors and the network. And so it also is the case that because the policy is tied to IP addresses, there's a complexity that will never go away. It turns out that humans don't actually talk to each other in IP addresses. They use things like web servers talking to database servers in language, and as long as that has to be translated, there's always a bit of an impedance mismatch. The other thing that occurs, regardless of whether it's network or SDN, is that often applications are fragmented. They don't live in a convenient neighborhood relative to network boundaries, and moving things around the data center just to get them in the right subnet, VLAN, or zone is often a non-starter. Now, this becomes a problem because it means that when people try to tighten segmentation rules, there's often an increased risk of having the wrong policy. If there's any mistakes in the translation from human speak to ACLs, something's going to break. If the tables are already full of rules and very complex, there's a certain fragility there just because of the complexity, and this leads to less agility. It's not as easy to be fast if you have to deal with all of these complications in order to get things done. So what we'd like to suggest is that if you are able to decouple security segmentation from the network architecture, it could be powerful. Let's dive in. Now, the simple fact is that segmentation is hard because there's opposing ideas at work. On the networking side, we like to build fast, smooth highways that provide any-to-any connectivity. But every time we want to carve that network up in order to put security controls in place, we tear up the roads for months to erect a toll booth. And then we slow all the traffic down so we can look at it individually. Of course, this idea of any-to-any connectivity and isolation or static control are actually at opposites. Well, with our roads and our tolling systems, we eventually figured out that if you decoupled them, that is, you put a little transponder inside the vehicle, you wouldn't have to interrupt the flow of traffic. You could decouple the collection of tolls from the roadway infrastructure. And in a similar way, what we've found working with enterprises around the world is that an architectural shift is needed. And that shift is to take security segmentation and network architecture and keep them separate. That is, to decouple them. And it turns out that if you did that, you could make security policies that did not require network changes. You could architect a network to offer smooth, fast, any-to-any connectivity without opening any doors or opening any paths for insecure communications. Each side of the infrastructure fence could end up happy. So let's talk about how security segmentation works. Like, what would be required to make this happen? Well, the first thing is, let's talk a little bit about what's needed. We would need a way to group logical bunches of things. That is, if we needed to avoid IP boundaries, we shouldn't talk about things in IP group. We need some other way that's using business language to group things. We would need a map. We'd need to know exactly how every single application was connected in enough detail that we could segment it properly. And we would also need a good way to draft, test, and enforce policy. If we're going to tighten segmentation controls, there's going to be a lot of people interested in a successful outcome. And it's not going to be good enough to just put some rules into a firewall, hope they're right, and you troubleshoot by waiting for the phone to ring. Because most applications are not on an IP boundary, things like a firewall log and other things don't exist in order to help us have a successful implementation. So let's talk about how to keep things grouped. It turns out most organizations already have a great way to do this. When we're around conference room tables, we talk about what's the role of the server. It's the web server. Which web server? It's the web server of my risk management application. The one in dev or the one in prod? No, the one in prod. Okay, and is that hosted in our Boston data center or is that in Munich? And so we use things like role, application, environment, and location already to describe things. So what if those same names could be used to anchor the segmentation policy? It would be decoupled from IP addresses. We would need a map in order to see what's talking to what, for sure, but the main reason is because it would form a shared view of the truth. If we want to do something like secure a single application out of a VLAN that contains others, many people are going to be interested in that. Operations, network, security people, and they're going to need to collaborate and come to a joint understanding of what the correct policy is, what the impact will be, and what the changes would be needed to put into a change management system. So it turns out that a map makes everything better. Finally, in order to achieve security segmentation that's separate from the network, there's going to need to be a way to draft, test, and enforce that policy. To have a safe workflow that allows you to confirm and validate the application flows, interact with the application owners, and model those policy effects. And ultimately, what this will do is allow you to deploy security segmentation without network risk. When policy is decoupled from the network, it turns out that every application can have its own policy. Many organizations can do environmental segmentation just because they have network boundaries between dev and prod. But if instead of using network boundaries, we use things like role and application, we can actually do application segmentation, tier-based segmentation, or even process-based segmentation. And these increases in granularity are easy to get when the boundaries aren't based on IP addresses. So many people tell us that when they've separated security segmentation from a network architecture, let's talk a little bit about how it works. In order to get good visibility of what's happening inside every application, the best place to ask is the applications and servers themselves. Particularly, if we want process-level visibility, the only place we can get it is inside the operating systems. The network simply can't get it. So it would be intelligent to have an agent, a visibility agent, whose only function is to decouple the visibility from the network. And so a small agent could gather up that information, the connection table plus the processes. But inside any business, that is a human amount of information that simply cannot be processed. And so we would want some automation, a second piece of software that could turn all of that connection data into a detailed application dependency map, a place where you could see clearly each application, how it's talking to core services, how it's talking to databases and other applications, and a place where then you could build, model, and test a security or a segmentation policy. Well, what would you do if you had a good segmentation policy? You'd need to distribute it. Well, how would we do that? What if we used enforcement points that you already own, that are ubiquitous throughout the data center and decoupled from the network? What do I mean? Well, it turns out that inside of every operating system in your data center, there's already a perfectly good stateful firewall. It's the Windows filtering platform if it's Windows. It's IP tables if it's a Linux box. There are similar things in AIX and Solaris. And so it could be that we could push the segmentation instructions down into the firewalls that are already present. And this would immediately have the effect of decoupling the security enforcement from the network, because every server would have the ACLs and a firewall all its own, controlled by a central brain. The security segmentation can be separate from the network. However you need to segment for the network, you can do. However you need to segment for the applications, for the roles, for the processes, can be done because the enforcement is separate from the network. So how do companies do this practically? It's a simple 5-step journey of getting the tooling, getting a map, some of these things, deciding what to segment, mapping out the environment, building and modeling that policy, and then completing it in a loop, a virtuous cycle where you can continue to secure the environment, starting with crown jewels and moving through the environment. So the right tools are fairly straightforward. In order to write fine-grained application-level policy, you're going to need maps at that level of granularity. You're going to need excellent policy management tools, things that allow you to write a decoupled policy, and then you're going to need to be able to program decoupled enforcement points that are not in line to traffic, that aren't chewing up CPU on your servers. And of course, it goes without saying that this will need to work across multiple environments in all of your different places that you host work, and be designed at the same time to allow automation and scale. So when you're deciding what to segment, most of our customers start where they get the greatest return. And they might prioritize that based on what is the value of the data, what are the audit requirements, what happens if it were compromised, how sensitive is this, as well as how quickly the application owner can take on board changes. And once that process is complete of prioritizing things, it's time to map things out. Here's one of those application dependency maps. You need this to be real time. You need it to have all of the port and process level information on it. You'll notice it's not a network map. It's a map that displays application topology. When you have that, you can build, test a policy. And if you have the ability to have visual feedback, everyone on the team can gather around that and understand exactly what's going on. So this then forms the ability to have a cycle, application by application. You can go through the environment, securing the crown jewels, securing the things that talk to the crown jewels, securing the core services, and you can move methodically through the environment, add security segmentation without making any changes to the underlying infrastructure. So if you were to start with visibility and be able to test the policy before enforcing it, move in phases, and have a partnership that crosses infrastructure, security, and applications, you're going to be able to have a successful segmentation project that doesn't involve harm to the network or the infrastructure. So with that, I think what we'd like to do is turn it back over and perhaps take some questions and see how we can help you in that way. David?
Excellent presentation, Nathaniel. Great to have you on. We do have some. While we do those questions, I'm going to pop up this poll question, and it says, are you considering or actively pursuing a segmentation project? So I'll just leave that up for the audience to answer. And let's see, first question that came in here, they're asking, is this a hardware solution? Is it an on-prem solution or a cloud solution? How does that work?
It actually works either way. We produce the software as SaaS software that you can subscribe to in the public cloud. We also produce it as software that you can run in your data center and have entirely inside your environment.
Okay, nice. Another question, John is asking, if my applications are deployed on the cloud, where is PCE in that?
Well, it probably depends on where you want to have your policy control. Some of our customers will then put the policy compute engine in the cloud. Many times, cloud deployments also involve cloud-to-ground communication. In other words, the cloud things are talking to things in the data center. And in that case, if there's also segmentation applied to many things in the data center, it could be that it makes sense to have the policy compute engine in the data center and control the fewer number of things in the cloud. We have some customers that put a policy compute engine in both places and then kind of federate the control between the cloud and ground. That's also a possibility, is to do a deployment where there's multiple policy compute engines that all work together to keep everything redundant and safe.
Okay, nice. Another question here, do we need agents on each device in the environment, server, storage, and network to build the dependency map?
No, you only put the agents on the places that you need to enforce, the places that you want to control or to write a decoupled segmentation policy.
Okay. And I've got another poll question. I'm going to pop up that question now. It says, what additional information would you like about the Illumio? Let's see, another question here. Is it hard to do the decoupling? They're concerned about their CMDB.
Well, it turns out that most people don't have a perfect CMDB. But because everybody calls their applications and servers things besides IP addresses, sometimes the information's in a CMDB, sometimes in a host naming convention, an IP management system, or Windows server names. And so usually all of the names that you need exist. They may be spread across several systems, but we just gather that information up and import it so that no one has to type it. So it's actually a fairly straightforward process that we're pretty good at this point.
So you could create a map that's most likely much more accurate than the CMD in most cases, I would guess, huh?
It's true, and in many cases, people ask for data to be exported from our product back into the CMDB to enrich it. If we know all the ports and the processes and other things, often that's data that doesn't exist in the CMDB, and it can be useful to put it back in. And at that point, then all of the names become available for people on automation teams or application teams that want to use metadata as a way to speed up their environment.
Very nice. Another question here about containers. Does this work with containers?
It does. It does. And that's one of the advantages of decoupling from the network is you can down inside a piece of sheet metal and actually keep different containers separate. So Docker, Kubernetes, all of those things fully supported.
Excellent. Let's see. What about auditors? This person is concerned about they have to, pass a PCI certification. Is this going to help them in that?
It will. We've had a number of customers, including people that I can't name, but everyone on this call has done business with them, that have passed PCI audits, that have passed high trust audits, that have passed SWIFT audits, compliance regulation with the government inside. You can imagine if you have a good map where you can show exactly what your segmentation rules are doing, you have good logs that show that the policy has not changed in the audit period, and you can show any policy violations, you can imagine it's fairly easy to make an auditor happy. And auditors always want to see you click that ratchet one ratchet tighter in the controls. And so when you're able to show that and show that it's been effective the whole time, it tends to be fairly easy to satisfy their concerns.
Okay, nice. And I know you mentioned in there that, just about every host out there, Linux or Windows, or every host out there really has a built-in software-based, host-based firewall. But I know people don't use those typically because they don't know what ports to block or to lock down.
That's right.
They're afraid of cutting off a real application, critical. So are you saying that the Illumio solution kind of helps us discover that and then automate it, essentially?
That's right, because all of those flows can be displayed on a map, and you can filter it down to see the right granularity for a single application. It gives you the visibility you need. In other words, you can't segment what you can't see, but if you can see it, you can segment it. And so if you have a good map, and then you have a way that the policy is decoupled, you can combine those two things together into an automated policy.
Excellent. And then can you kind of walk us through, I mean, you said this isn't hardware, it's all software. So if somebody wanted to get started with this, kind of what would be the process?
Well, it's fairly straightforward. We've got a couple of ways that you can do that. The simplest is that we have a guided tour. In other words, you can log in through our website, and you can actually have something kind of walk you through the process of developing one of these decoupled policies. We also have a free trial. You say, well, I want to try it myself. I don't want to be walked through. I want to play. Well, we have that. There's a free trial that you can do. And of course, if you've got an active segmentation project and you're saying, you know, we need to do something by and give you a customized demo, talk about your specific requirements, and work towards, you know, building something for you in a proof of concept or other ways that directly addresses your project. So kind of from casual interest all the way to I have a problem I need to solve right now, we've got something for you.
Okay. All right. Excellent. Well, it's been really great having you on the event today, Nathaniel. A really excellent presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
For more information on the Illumio solution, of course, check out that link that's right there on the screen, illumio.com/TD for test drive, and you can take it for a test drive yourself. Also, check out in the handout section right there, there is a free ebook. It's an 80-page ebook, so there's tons of info in there, and this is the definitive guide to microsegmentation. So make sure you download that right now, and then you can read it later at your leisure. And again, I'll leave the URL on the screen right there, illumio.com/TD. Gift card winners on today's event. We have 2 more Amazon $500 gift cards to give away. They are going out to Matt Karshner from Pennsylvania. Congratulations, Matt Karshner from Pennsylvania and from Ohio. So those are the 3 gift card winners on the event today. Just got a comment that the ebook is good. Thank you. And Corey said, thank you, Illumio. Chris said, thank you, Illumio. Great information. Chris said, congrats to all winners. So thank you, everyone, for those excellent comments. And before you go, I want to remind you to check out our 10 on Tech podcast over or wherever you subscribe to podcasts. If you are a potential presenter on the MegaCast and EcoCast event, just email connect@actualtechmedia.com to chat with us about presenting on a future event. And then last thing I want to remind you of is our really big event happening next week, one of the biggest events we do the entire year, and that is the Emerging Innovations Virtual Summit. It's 1 week from today, starting at noon Eastern. We will have presenters on from Gigamon, SaltStack, Igneous, iLand, KnowBe4, Western Digital, Clear Sky Data, Veeam, and others. Going to have independent experts on. We're going to have a CIO talking about their challenges and how they overcame them. We're going to have an author from Pluralsight come on who's an expert in hybrid cloud and public cloud. And so lots of independent experts will be presenting on the event. So watch your email inbox for an invitation to that event. If you don't have one, just visit events.actualtechmedia.com. Thank you, everyone, for joining today's Networking EcoCast. I hope you have a great day. See you next time.